The head coach is dead. Long live the all-powerful manager. Despite Simon's questioning of Arteta's influence in the selection of his new boss, he has confirmed that he will be involved in it.
I can talk about what we are doing right now, and I'm going to be very much involved in that process because we want to find the right person, first of all, and the right person has to be someone who is able to cooperate and make each other better and take us to a different level. That's the objective of it.
Elsewhere, over at Old Trafford, Ruben Amorim has said that recruitment has to start and finish with the manager. So let's ask how all-in you should be with a manager. Is the concept of a manager returning after years of everyone telling us that actually it's just going to be a head coach and the sporting director is going to be the main overlord?
Well, again, it depends upon the structure of the club. But I didn't suggest that he wouldn't be involved in the process. I suggested he wouldn't be the deciding vote in the process. I mean, of course he's got to be involved in the process to some extent, because there's no point bringing in a sporting director that he loathes, is there? So you do need to have...
To what extent should be involved?
Well, I suspect to find that there's a synergy of thinking, that there's a correlation of outlooks, that there's a basic alignability, albeit the sporting director is a role for the club. And it will go beyond. It should go beyond the manager, and it should go beyond the manager's tenure. Because the one thing that you know, with a very few exceptions, is that when you hire a manager, the next decision you're going to make with him at some point is when you're going to fire him, whoever they are. And so, with that in mind, sporting directors need to be a tool. It's like a human resources department. The human resources department, the head of human resources, his function is to make sure that the employees are happy and content and managed properly, and disciplinary processes are conducted appropriately, and pay reviews. But they're predominantly a tool for the business to make sure that that is indeed the case. So a sporting director's role, alongside, I believe emphatically that football managers should have the final say on who they want to be part of their framework to build a successful team. But that would mean that football managers have got to be running around the globe looking at every single player, which they won't do. So then what happens is that someone presents them with the fodder for them to be able to decide whether they actually want this player or not.
Do you agree with the structure of a sporting director and then a manager, or would you prefer a sporting director and then a head coach? The difference being the manager has got more responsibilities.
Well, I think it's incidental. I think it's semantics.
Do you?
Yes, I don't think... Well,
because Arteta did fight to have his title changed from head coach to manager.
Well, maybe that's because he feels the necessity to do that. I don't think it really makes a lot of difference. Do you think he's negotiating contracts?
No.
So then, by definition, the managerial role that we talk about from years gone past, where the players were sat in the manager's office and he was deciding, we've heard the stories of managers going, right, just sign a contract here and I'll fill in the details because you're going to be all right.
So he's not really the manager in the old school sense?
No, but the old school sense has been found to be failing because of allegations of corruption. The idea that you can ask a football manager to be an economist, it's a terribly conflicting position. Why would you want to be negotiating with a player for salary and putting yourself in a conflict with that player 6 months down the road when you've done another negotiation? He finds out that you gave some more and more money to someone else. You don't want that conflict as the head of the football team. And if that's manager, if it means that it's so important to you to have the terminology manager, I mean, I don't think it means anything. I think head coach is equally as compelling because that's fundamentally what you are.
Did you negotiate the contracts with the players, or did your managers do that when you were in charge?
No, my chief executive did it. Once I've entered into a discussion, albeit through my chief executive, because when you're the money, you don't want to be in the room, because if you're the money, you're in the room, you get put to the question. You want to be able, someone wants to be able to step out of the room and do what it looks like they're doing to be able to create a different tension in the negotiation. Whereas if you're the money, you're the guy that can say yes or no. If you're a chief executive, he can say to somebody, well, my brief is I can pay you £50,000 a week, I can't pay you any more. And if I want to pay you any more, I've got to reference someone else. And it takes a different dimension of a conversation to be able to achieve negotiating positions. So go to your question, a manager, once you've entered into a discussion and you've agreed with the manager that you're going to sign a player, then you take on the responsibility of delivering that outcome. And that's where the frustration can come into play, because if you've got a player, and sometimes I would reference it with a manager, but very, 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 very rarely, which is this kid wants X amount per week. And sometimes a manager would go, well, he ain't getting that.
So he would have an input. He would give you
advice.
Depends
upon if it was someone like Warnock that was a mature manager that was workable with. If it was someone like Dowie, then no. Because they're not workable with and they're just bloody difficult.
Yeah, the most important thing, though, in a structure is to have collaboration, because you don't part with 40 million quid unless you've got...
Well, there is ultimately... yes, collaboration is, of course... if you're a collaborator. Some people aren't collaborators. I would suggest to you that Mourinho ain't a collaborator. Yet he was successful at times when he didn't collaborate, and he's been unsuccessful at times when he's been made to collaborate. It depends upon the personality. And of course, I think in life you get places because of people rather than in spite of them. But also in this rarefied world of football where people believe their own crap and sometimes get a bit carried away of themselves, it's very difficult to collaborate, because on one side of the argument is the devil incarnate, which is the owner, the guy that's writing all the checks that's making you all millionaires. And then there's the other side of the equation, which is the football manager that must have what he wants, when he wants, irrespective of the consequences.
Yeah, and listen, you go on about owners, and you've been an owner, so you know what it's like to be in the chair. But not necessarily they always make the right decisions. I mean, the cost of hiring and firing managers, when you actually think about it, is incredibly high. And I wonder whether or not we're going to go into a mode now where we have longer tenures again, because some of this trigger pulling is very costly.
Well, they're less expensive than they used to be. Yeah, because there's more mitigation built into managers' contracts than there used to be.
So they're just getting sensible with their litigation?
Well, they're getting more sensible with their mitigation and the obligation upon people to be able to have to find work. You can't just sit on your backside and wait your contract out for 2 years. Because every time I fired a manager, and there were regular occurrences of that, if they didn't go and get themselves a job, and if they did try and go and get themselves a job, I remember Peter Taylor tried to do it to me, going to work for another football club for about 50p so I could pay up his full salary, because there was a mitigation clause in his contract. So there's all ways of being more sophisticated. You're thinking, once upon a time, you sign a manager on a 3-year contract, the fellow was bleeding useless, you binned him out the door after 18 months, and you had to pay him the other 18 months.
That's not the case no more.
Not so much now. It is with the top draw managers, because you can't get them otherwise, because it's a rare marketplace. There's so few of them about that it's actually demand.
So what happens in a
supply
contract?
Exceeds demand.
How much of his
supply is less
contract?
than demand, sorry.
How much money of his contract is Steve Cooper going to get after being sacked after
Depends
12
upon
games?
the contract he signed.
Three-year contract.
I don't know what contract he signed.
But roughly,
I don't know what contract he signed.
What's the kind of thing? What kind of deal would you be doing with a manager like that?
What would I be doing?
Yeah.
I would be saying to Steve Cooper, here's how it's going to work. I will give you 30p in a pound of what you're owed in a contract up front. Now you can walk away with it. I'll drag it over 3 years.
So you would enter negotiation. You wouldn't have a preconceived idea saying after 6 months, if we part ways, you get this much. But
also you'd have a clause in the contract which enables you to mitigate. So if he goes and gets another job, then you don't. The object of the aim is not for them to get double bubble. And Steve Cooper is not in the elite bracket of managers that would be in a situation where he can create that. Now, if his agent has negated that and created a situation where he does, then more fall and less necessity for engaging a manager that they've only had for 4 months.
Who do you blame for that tenure not working out? 12 games.
Oh no. Who do I blame for every appointment that I made that didn't work out? Me. Because I saw something in them that I was unable to get from them. I'm not alone in that, but I'm the ultimate responsibility for it. It may well be the bone idle players that created the outcome, but it was me that put the guy in place that wasn't able to communicate to the players not to make them bone idle.
Did you learn from making mistakes with hiring managers?
I just made different ones.
But did you hire them in different ways? Because hiring is the most important thing in any business. Whatever you do, hiring people is the most important thing that you do.
Well, recruitment
exactly. That's what I mean.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Of course, it's a significant part of it, but how you manage people during the course of their employment is also equally as important. Because any fool can hire people. It's not difficult to hire somebody.
But if you hire the wrong people, you've got a problem.
Or sometimes, yes, of course, and that's the way. That's why you interview people properly.
Yeah,
and you interview
that's
people,
my point.
and you interview people with the reality of what they're going to be facing, which makes it, with me, a very stark interview.
So you were always honest with people right from the very start. This is what it's going to be like.
Because what's the point of being otherwise?
Well, I can imagine that isn't always the case.
Well, it depends who's doing the interviewing, and depends what kind of owner you've got. When you're talking about someone like Sheikh Mansour, you don't need to be honest with Pep Guardiola, because your honesty is that you're going to give him exactly what he wants. He's the best coach in the world, right? And so it's a different conversation. When you're at a different level, say the level of myself at Crystal Palace, albeit still a significant football club, they need to understand the environment they're working within. I don't want somebody that tells me what I want to hear in an interview.
You want real.
You want the person, because then they can never say to you, they can never back channel you in the media saying, well, I didn't know what it was.
And that's the key thing about hiring that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you can hire a manager in the summer and then decide after 12 games, because Steve Cooper's situation is not unique, but it is something that should never have got to this stage.
Because it was a poor footballing decision in some respects.
Well, there was an emergency decision based on the fact that Graham Potter was going to take the job, then he wasn't going to take the job.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.